Friday, 8th May 1987, shortly after 7 in the evening. A blue Toyota HiAce van, stolen hours earlier from a business in Dungannon, rolls through the village of Loughgall in County Armagh. Behind it comes a JCB digger taken from a farm on the Lislasly Road 2 miles west of the village. In the digger's bucket sits an oil drum packed with high explosive, wired to two 40-second fuses. Estimates of the bomb's weight range from 200 to 400 pounds. The 8 men split between the van and the digger wear balaclavas, boilersuits and body armour. The van drives past the police station. The digger drives past it too. 2 slow passes. Something feels wrong. Loughgall RUC station is a part-time base, open from 9 to 11 in the morning and 5 to 7 in the evening. It should be closing right about now, but it looks empty. No lights, no movement, no sign of the officers inside. Several of the IRA men sense it and stop to debate whether to continue. They decide to go ahead. At about 7:15, Declan Arthurs, 21, steers the digger through the perimeter fence. Tony Gormley and Gerard O'Callaghan ride on the machine beside him, in journalist Peter Taylor's phrase, literally riding shotgun, a weapon in one hand, a lighter in the other. The van stops short. 5 men jump out. Eugene Kelly at the wheel, Patrick Kelly, the unit commander, in the passenger seat, and Jim Liner, Padraig McKerney and Seamus Donnelly in the back. They open fire on the building. The fuse is lit. Then the SAS open fire. Then soldiers inside the station and in 5 concealed positions around it opened up with M16s, G3s and 2 L7A2 general-purpose machine guns. More than 600 spent British cartridge cases were recovered from the scene afterwards, and roughly 125 bullet holes were counted in the bodywork of the van alone. The IRA fired about 70 rounds. None of them hit a soldier. It was over in minutes. All 8 IRA men were dead, each hit multiple times, including in the head. 2 of them were unarmed when they were shot. Declan Arthurs was killed in a laneway opposite the Loughgall FC grounds, a cigarette lighter still in his right hand. 3 of the dead were shot at close range as they lay either dead or wounded on the ground. 6 men of the support unit waiting outside the village escaped, passing through Army and RUC checkpoints that were set up after the firing stopped. Loughgall was the IRA's heaviest single loss of life in one incident since the Clonmalt killings of 1921. The ambush had a code name, Operation Judy. The reason the SAS were waiting in that village, the reason the station felt wrong to the men who died there, is the question this story is about. British intelligence had been watching the pattern build. The historical record supports that statement. British forces had weeks of warning that an operation was coming. The specific target, the RUC station at Loughgall, was identified at least 10 days before 8th May. At least 24 hours' notice of the attack window followed. The SAS was pre-positioned. The trap was set before the IRA unit left its staging points. But prior awareness isn't the same as a named source. 30 years of released files have named no one. No court, no inquiry, no declassified document has identified Gerry Adams or any other individual as the person who told the British what was coming. Allegation, not proof. The two need to be kept apart if the question is going to be answered honestly. 3 separate questions sit inside this charge, and they have 3 separate answers. The established facts concern what the East Tyrone Brigade did between December 1985 and May 1987, and what that made visible to anyone watching. The disputed chain concerns how the British turned observation into an ambush. The third question is the narrow one. whether Gerry Adams gave the operation away, and what evidence it would take to prove it. Start with the pattern, because the pattern is where the plausible non-informer route begins. In 1985, a 28-year-old Republican from Dungannon named Patrick Joseph Kelly became commander of the Provisional IRA's East Tyrone Brigade. Kelly was a veteran of the movement's internal wars. He wasn't a Sinn Féin man, he was a soldier. Kelly's campaign came from a strategy developed by his colleague Jim Liner, who had adapted Maoist military theory to Irish conditions. Create zones the security forces couldn't control and expand them. Phase 1 was destroying isolated rural RUC stations and intimidating or killing the contractors who rebuilt them. The East Tyrone Brigade would make the countryside ungovernable, one outpost at a time. Under Kelly's command, the campaign followed a template that became almost industrial in its regularity. 7th December 1985, Ballygawley. The attack was timed for the evening shift change, around 7 o'clock. An armed team raked the barracks with fire from AK-47 and AR-15 rifles, while a second team planted a roughly 100-pound bomb inside. The unit withdrew. The bomb exploded and destroyed the station. 2 officers, Reserve Constable William Clements, 52, and Constable George Gilliland, 34, had been shot dead at the front gate. 3 more were wounded. 11th December 1985, Tynan. A mortar barrage wounded 4 RUC officers. 19th December 1985, Castlederg. 7 p.m. 6 mortar shells, fired from a stolen van with a hole cut in its roof, wrecked the station and injured 6 people. Around 22 December, Carrickmore took 7 mortars at the joint RUC and British Army base. Then, on 11th August 1986, the method changed. The target was the Birches, an isolated part-time RUC station near Portadown, unmanned at the time of the attack. The unit hijacked a JCB digger, loaded a bomb of about 200 pounds into its bucket, raked the station with gunfire, drove the digger through the reinforced perimeter fence, lit the fuse, and left. The bomb destroyed most of the building and blew the roof off a pub across the road. A diversionary attack at Pomeroy, 30 kilometres away, pulled security forces in the wrong direction. The digger was most likely driven by Declan Arthurs, who had learned the machine working on his family's farm. He would die at Loughgall 9 months later, in a laneway, holding a lighter. The Birches was a tactical turning point. Historians treat it as the blueprint for Loughgall. But for British intelligence, it was something else again. The first time the IRA had used a JCB as a bomb delivery vehicle. When reports reached the security forces in early May 1987 that a digger would be used against another RUC station, the method was already on file. Add that to everything else, and the pattern is hard to miss. The targets: isolated, rural, often part-time stations. The geography: East Tyrone and North Armagh. The timing: evening, clustered around the shift change. Between December 1985 and May 1987, the East Tyrone Brigade carried out 9 attacks on RUC stations in East and Mid Tyrone and North Armagh. By May 1987, British intelligence had been watching the tactic develop for 17 months. The Provisional IRA had effectively taught them how to read it. Pattern analysis is a legitimate intelligence route to being ready. If a unit keeps attacking the same class of target at the same hour with an increasingly distinctive method, an analyst does not need a mole inside the unit to predict that the next attack will look like the last one. The Birches taught the British what the IRA could do. Loughgall matched the profile. But pattern analysis has a ceiling. It could tell the British what kind of station would be hit and probably how. The open record contains no evidence that it revealed Loughgall as the specific target. Naming the station and knowing the night required something more: surveillance, signals interception, a human source, or a convergence of all three. That is where the certainty stops and the dispute begins. What is documented about British awareness is substantial. The Pat Finucane Centre, which has long campaigned on behalf of the families, cites security force documents stating that the military had at least 24 hours prior notice of the IRA's intention to bomb the Loughgall station, with some reports indicating knowledge several weeks in advance. BBC Spotlight reported that by April 1987, police knew the IRA was planning to attack a police station and knew the target at least 10 days before 8th May. The intelligence was operational, not abstract. The RUC's covert unit, E4A, located the stolen digger in the Loughgall area and treated it as an early warning indicator. A covert observation post kept watch on the machine. When it began moving on the evening of 8th May, the SAS moved into position. One published account claims a special branch handler received actionable information on 30th of April, 9 days before the attack. Local residents noticed something too. From around 6th May, the visible patrols around the village quietly disappeared. None of this tells us how the British knew. The open record offers 4 competing explanations. The first is human intelligence. Some accounts allege a double agent inside the IRA unit itself, killed conveniently in the ambush. Historian Richard English argues the key intelligence didn't come from within the 8-man team, though he notes a claim that one of the dead, Tony Gormley, was known to security forces as a well-paid special branch informant. The claim is asserted in some sources and corroborated in none. Another account from the Irish Observer puts the first warning 3 weeks before Loughgall from a special branch agent in Monaghan town whom Patrick Kelly approached while trying to contact Jim Linner. It's a single-source story. A Daily Mail feature based on the memoir of former IRA man Harry McCallion says, "Someone who knew it was going to happen contacted MI5 directly, weeks in advance," and concedes that the identity of the PIRA source remains unknown. The IRA's own search for the tout came up empty. The man the IRA put in charge of the hunt was Freddie Scappaticci, the British agent codenamed Steak Knife, head of the IRA's internal security unit, secretly working for the Army's Force Research Unit. The Smithick Tribunal later noted that the IRA never learned how the security forces obtained their advance warning. One of the 2 organisations investigating the leak was itself the leak. The second explanation is technical surveillance. This is the strongest rival to the informer theory. Accounts describe MI5 listening devices in the homes of IRA suspects, telephone intercepts of compromising calls, and long-term technical surveillance of an IRA explosives hide at Ardbow on the shores of Lough Neagh. History Ireland documents a monitored phone call in which an IRA volunteer told his girlfriend about the Loughgall plan. BBC Spotlight broadcast secret army camera footage of IRA suspects in Tyrone and reported that the Loughgall unit had been under similar surveillance in the weeks before the attack. One account of the period describes a safe house that was, unknown to the IRA men who used it, bugged. The third explanation is the pattern itself, already established. Loughgall was a predictable target in a predictable campaign. The fourth is convergence. Journalist Mark Urban, in his account of the SAS, describes no single source at all. Surveillance, signals interception, and human reporting layered together gradually until the picture was complete. The RUC's tasking and coordinating group aggregated the inputs into an actionable warning. In that reading, there was no breakthrough moment and no informer holding the key. There was an accumulated intelligence picture built over months. Each of these routes has credible advocates. None is confirmed to the exclusion of the others. And that is the first reason the strongest objection to the Adams allegation holds up. British forces being prepared does not prove a specific informer, let alone identify one. Preparedness is equally consistent with a bugged house, an intercepted phone call, a watched digger, or a source inside the Republican movement whose name appears nowhere in the available record. So where does the Adams allegation come from? It comes from one document. The file is a Department of Foreign Affairs memo dated 15th May 1987, 1 week after the ambush. An Irish official recorded a conversation with Father Dennis Fall, a Catholic priest from Dungannon who was a prominent critic of state violence and of the IRA alike. Fall passed on a rumour he said was doing the rounds in Tyrone, that the IRA team was set up by Gerry Adams himself. He told the official he was intrigued by it. The same memo recorded the rumour's supporting detail, that Jim Liner and Padraig McKerney had threatened to execute Gerry Adams shortly before Loughgall because they opposed his political strategy and were drifting toward Republican Sinn Féin. That detail never appeared in any court, any inquest, or any official finding. It exists only inside a priest's hearsay, written down by a diplomat. That memo sat in the National Archives for 30 years. Released on the 29th of December 2017 under the 30-year rule, it hit the news in Dublin, Belfast and London on the same day. RTE's headline quoted Sinn Féin's response. The suggestion was utter nonsense. The Glasgow Herald published a short article reporting that a priest in Dungannon had passed the rumour to Irish officials. This is the item commenters cite when the Adams allegation comes up in online discussion. The Herald piece reported the existence of the rumour. It produced no evidence for the rumour's truth, because the underlying document contained none. It was a relay of hearsay. The journalist Ed Maloney, who has chronicled the IRA for decades, responded the same day that Fall was transmitting a rumour, not evidence, and that there were other, equally credible explanations for what happened at Loughgall. Slugger O'Toole, the Northern Ireland politics site, reached a similar conclusion. Other explanations were just as plausible, and the truth might never be known. Tom King, Secretary of State for Northern Ireland from 1985 to 1989, had his own assessment. "I heard reports it was a set-up by Gerry Adams," he said, "but never saw evidence it was true." That is the closest an official who held the Northern Ireland portfolio during the ambush has come to addressing the claim. He presided over the security apparatus of the time, and he saw no evidence. That is the documentary record on the Adams question. One priest's rumour, written down by an official, released 30 years later, denied by its subject, dismissed by his party. One third-hand document. There is no file placing Adams in the chain of intelligence that put the SAS in that village, a point even the most careful reconstruction of the episode concedes. Against that, one biographical fact carries its own weight. When the 8 dead men were buried, in the biggest Republican funerals in Northern Ireland since the hunger strikes of 1981, it was Gerry Adams who gave the graveside oration, telling mourners that the British government does not understand the Jim Liners, the Padraig McKerneys. It thinks it can defeat them. It never will. The allegation and the eulogy sit awkwardly together. That isn't proof of innocence. It's a measure of how little the record actually holds. One rumour against one funeral speech. In the comment sections where Loughgall is argued, the allegation has a life of its own. 6 comments directly about Adams generated 42 measured engagements, likes, replies, reactions, and they sit at opposite ends of the spectrum. One asks, Adams setting the ambush up? Another answers, I find it hard to believe that Adam tipped off MI5, the typo left as written, because that is how the record reads. The engagement numbers are small, but they show the shape of the argument, a charge on one side, an instinctive dismissal on the other, and almost nothing in between that engages with the evidence. Around them, the wider debate is heavily polarized. 24 comments classified as debate or argument generated 393 measured engagements, nearly 10 times the Adams-specific traffic. The frames are consistent. The dead are gallant and brave heroes, or martyrs. The organisation is described as rotten to the core, with touts. The SAS are elite professionals, or, in one commenter's phrase, acting as judge, jury, and executioner. One commenter cut to the legal question directly. Certainly, executing wounded criminals without trial is a crime. I'm not sure of the legality of using the SAS to ambush criminals. None of those frames answers the intelligence question. Whether the Loughgall men were heroes or murderers, whether the SAS operation was justified or an execution, is a separate argument from the one being tested here. A person can believe the dead were martyrs and still see there is no evidence against Adams. A person can believe the ambush was justice and still be unable to name the source. The moral wars and the forensic question aren't the same war. So what would actually settle it? The answer is specific, and it comes in categories. An MI5 file naming Gerry Adams as a source, informer, codename, handling records, payment records, tasking notes. MI5's own guidance concedes that released files are often redacted and that some documents are retained. The agency has never released anything touching this question. Special branch informer handling records of the kind used to run agents like Steak Knife. Those records exist in some form for every agent the RUC ran during the Troubles. The question is whether any of them carry Adams's name. SAS after-action reports and Operation Judy planning documents. These would show what the soldiers were told and when. The operational paper trail of the ambush itself. RUC tasking and coordinating group minutes. The TCG was the body that turned raw intelligence into an actionable warning. Its minutes would name the source, or the surveillance operation, or the intercept that justified moving 24 soldiers into a village. Signals intelligence tasking records, which calls were intercepted, when and how they were acted on. If the breakthrough came from a phone tap, the tasking log would show it. Or testimony from a former intelligence officer or handler willing to confirm on the record that Adams was run as an agent. No such person has come forward. No anonymous source, no memoir, no whistleblower has named him. Every one of those categories is knowable. Every one of them is closed. The Loughgall paperwork is tangled in the wider legacy process, and the scale of the secrecy is difficult to grasp. In 2016, the BBC reported that the Loughgall civil action would require the examination of nearly 10 million intelligence records to identify and disclose relevant material. 10 million records. The PSNI itself acknowledged in discovery proceedings that a search across more than 9.5 million of them would be needed. The legal route to those files has been contentious. In 2001, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that the British government's investigation into the deaths was inadequate, awarding £10,000 to each of the families of the dead, while making no finding that the killings were unlawful. In September 2024, the Northern Ireland Court of Appeal handed down its judgment in the case of the Loughgall families and others, ruling on whether the government's Troubles Legacy Act could lawfully end the inquests and civil actions, the very mechanisms by which families had been trying to force the files open. The judgment recorded the visceral stakes in a single line. These people carry with them the visceral pain of brutal events from our past. There is precedent for what disclosure can do. Operation Kenova, the investigation into Steak Knife, forced MI5 to hand over top-secret files that had never previously been disclosed, and those files changed public understanding of one of the conflict's most sensitive in former operations. The Smithick Tribunal heard evidence from former intelligence personnel about how informers were actually run. Both cases proved that closed files, when prized open, can settle questions that rumour couldn't. No equivalent release has happened for Loughgall. The intelligence chain that put the SAS in that village remains exactly where it was in 1987, inside the files. A note on the comment record itself. The sample available for this investigation was partial, 50 comments in full, carrying 608 of 652 measured engagements. A wider audit of the same discussion counted 112. The platform metadata listed 140. The numbers don't fully reconcile. That discrepancy is a reason to treat any conclusion drawn from the comments alone with caution. What the comment record can show is that the Adams allegation circulates and that the surrounding debate is polarized. It can't settle whether the allegation is true. But the intelligence question does not depend on the comments. It depends on the files. And the files haven't come out. So the verdict on the evidence available. Prior British awareness of the Loughgall operation is supported. The warning came weeks early. The target was known at least 10 days ahead. The attack window was known at least a day in advance. The SAS was in position before the IRA unit moved. The exact intelligence chain is unresolved. Surveillance, signals interception, human sources and pattern analysis all have credible advocates. No named source has been confirmed. The IRA's own investigation failed to find the answer, and the investigation was run by a British agent. The claim that Gerry Adams gave the operation away is unproven. There is no court finding, no official document, no corroborated witness statement linking him to the Loughgall intelligence. There is one priest's rumour, recorded in a state file, reported by a newspaper and denied by its subject. Absence of proof isn't proof of innocence. The record simply does not contain the answer. How much remains hidden in those closed files after all this? The challenge is precise. Bring forward a file, an informer record, a handler's testimony, an official release. Anything that names the source or clears the name. 37 years after 8 men died in a village that looked too quiet, that document hasn't appeared.